Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
Dude, Jack Carr week. It's here. We are reading and reviewing another book in the James Reece series. It feels great.
Dude, it feels good to be back in this universe.
Yes.
And was it last week or a couple weeks ago, we did a Only the Dead preview pod. And in that, I said we need answers.
Finality. Yes.
Finality. And I don't know, I didn't, at the time, I had the copy, but I had not read a thing. So I'm completely transparent with you guys. I did not know the answer to my own question. And boy, are we getting answers. And I really think that is the theme going forward here. Like this book is a summation of the first saga of James Reece. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I feel like we've been mountain climbers. We've been trekking this whole time, and we're finally getting to that summit. You know, it just feels like something's coming. I think it was brilliant move to start this book and make the whole point of this book answering the question, who is Tom Reece?
Right.
And what did he leave for James? We've gotten so much of Tom already in little bits and snippets, and we're finally trying to see what his overarching message was, his life's work. You know, what was his lasting legacy, a job that he never finished. And he wanted to pass to James. He was hesitant about passing to James. He ultimately even says, maybe you shouldn't find this, and I hope you don't, in a sense. And I just love, you're right, that we are building towards that. Smart move, genius. And we should say, we assume this book will get there, right? The way it's set up.
True.
But neither Chris nor I have finished the entire book. We've only read parts 1 and 2, which we're covering here on our part 1 episode, but we're covering the first 2 parts of the book up to chapter, what are we at, like 44?
48-ish.
48, yep.
47, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's where part 2 ends. So I would say it's roughly almost the exact halfway point of the book, chapters 1 through 48. We will not be talking about anything in the second half of the book here today. We'll have that episode to you hopefully in about a week or so.
Yeah, and I don't know, it gives an interest. Every time we do this, where we record a pod before we finish the book, it's interesting, right? We are able to give some takes, and honestly, we're not lying here. We both have not finished the book. Mike actually, before, like not even 3 hours, 2 hours before we started recording, he's like, "I'm only on chapter 33. Where did you get to?" And I was like, "Well, I made it all the way to chapter 50, and if you can make it to the end of part 2, that would be good. But if not, there's some other parts where we could cut it." And he made it. So we're going to talk all of part 2. And boy, am I glad he made it to the end of part 2.
Oh, dude.
Might be the best part of the first half of this book.
I think so. It's a killer
the scenes
action
in Boston.
Sequence. Yeah.
Yes. So I guess we should caveat, this book, by the time this pod comes out, the book will have been out about a week, right? So congratulations to Jack Carr on another successful pub day. Yeah. And we hope that you've had a chance to, one, get the book. If you hadn't, I don't know why you're listening to this pod, but if you hadn't, go out and buy it. Listen to the first half of the book. Stop, come back, and then listen to us talk about chapters 1 through 47.
Yeah, man. I just saying all that, setting it up is getting me so amped, so jazzed. Just so much to say on this half, and thank God you gave me that advice. You're like, yeah, kind of push a little bit here. See what you can do. I put my headphones in. I went on 3-speed. Some people might find that crazy, but Ray Porter is just perfect at
He's
this.
very good.
His delivery, I would listen at 1 speed, and it's amazing. Give it to me at 3-speed, I could still keep up. It's just all the voices are so distinct. This is one of those audiobooks that I think transforms the universe. It just adds that extra layer of depth. I'm really enjoying Ray Porter, even though I've had to go fast at times to catch up to you, Chris, speed reader over there. But man, just it didn't even matter. I just was propelled through the end of that second half, which I can't say about the first part of the book.
Yeah.
Little slow going.
Before we get into it, you want to set us up, kind of remind us where we last left off with James Reece from In the Blood.
Yeah, and I think you're right that our preview episode, we tried to do a little bit of that as we went over the prologue, chapter 1 and chapter 2 in a lot of depth. So definitely check out that episode. But we'll do a little recap here. I mean, In the Blood introduced Alice. I think that's a huge point.
Yes.
That thankfully,
Alice is back. Alice
Yeah.
is back.
Alice is being touched on here. I think she's been handled pretty well. It kind of whet my appetite a little bit, the time she's been dropped.
Has me intrigued.
Really, really intrigued. And I'm hoping the second part goes even deeper into that because some seeds have been planted. So basically, though, Reece and Katie are at the ranch at their house, and he's considering proposing. It's that 2-bottle of wine night, and now we get a 3-bottle of wine night.
We get a 3-bottle. We'll get into that later.
But he's thinking about proposing when all of a sudden a phone rings, even though they're out of cell service, everything should be blocked off. They should have no connections to the outside world. But it was Alice pulling her strings to warn Reece. Simply, we hear because she kind of took a liking to him and realizes he's on the good side of things. And so Alice tips him off and says, guys are coming, and gives him the heads up. He's able to give the key that his father left for him in the what kind of car was that? Was that the Wagoneer?
Wagoneer.
That was the Wagoneer.
It was his old Wagoneer, yeah.
And then in the rifle case that was left for him. So he passes that key to the lockbox to Katie right before federal agents swarm the place, take him into custody.
Take everything, by the way.
Yeah.
When they went into that, sorry to stop you, but when they went into that and how they documented, took all of his weapons.
Right.
Literally stripped his house of everything.
It's like Mark Hook. The pro-life guy that they arrested in the early in the morning with long guns pointed at his wife and kids at the front door. It's just like I don't know why I drew that connection, but thinking back to that scene,
is this necessary? Is that
right.
necessary?
What is justice? What is the role of the government in doing that kind of thing to the citizenry? And yeah, I just had reminiscences of some current abuses of power, that we can read about. So I'm like. Mm-hmm. And then he's in solitary confinement. I mean, Reece is going through some things, He's got a lot going on here. But what else did I miss? Where else were we left off hoping we can get more of?
Yeah, so he's been taken. President has been assassinated. We don't know by who.
Right.
We're going to quickly find out early on in this book, sort of what's going on. I think that's kind of what you were hinting at, that this, maybe if we had stopped a little bit earlier before we got to the action-packed scenes in Boston, this, I don't want to call it a letdown. It's because I enjoy exposition, but it was just a lot of exposition. Like right. we've not only are we getting exposition about the backstory of Tom Reece, the backstory of what maybe potentially, I could even see them going, this is kind of, again, I haven't read in the future. So I don't want to, I guess, go into spoiler territory here, but he was kind of hinting at that, maybe the events that took place in Terminalist, the fact that he was placed in that cancer thing, maybe all a part of this consortium thing, this overarching deep state-esque plan that we believe his father and, this Poe guy, along with, the guy who was tapped to be president, who was killed in the prologue, were working and fighting against, right? As well as, it's Jack Carr, he's putting in all these real world touch points. It kind of blends the line of conspiracy theory, and I don't know, do you know how much is his thoughts versus what he's putting into the Russians' minds versus, what he thinks the Russians would say. It's very towing the line of all right, does he think this is no, he's speaking as a Russian. I don't know. It's very interesting to me trying to figure out what he's putting in on it, Yeah. That part of it I did like. It was kind of like a mind game for me.
No, I like that part. And it's almost getting at that faction, that Brad Thor style faction. But I'll say the exposition's been a lot of fun. It was a touch heavy-handed at times, I'll agree, because we had Vic, spring Reece out of jail. He's got to talk about how Alice ran this report and basically came up with the evidence that they had to vet to make sure Reece was clean, and he was not the one. who killed the president, and he planned the assassination. And Alice uncovered that. But Vic, of course, needed to do due diligence and make sure Alice didn't fabricate that evidence to exonerate Reece. Can you trust Alice? That's one of the big questions. But regardless, we're getting Vic explaining all that. You're right. Then we get a little explanation about, well, we get quite a bit of the Russians. So I think you're right. But
yeah, we get a lot of the Russians.
The exposition there, and I am a junkie for the geopolitics in these stories, it's just too removed from the plot. It's like, I'm going to write this kind of mini essay in a chapter all about fraudulent elections in the US and Russian interference and Ukraine and Iran and Israel and who would do what and kind of wargaming it out. And while I'm having fun doing that,
while also social media and fake news and literally having a touch point on it, talking about the culture wars, like literally every single hot button issue was brought up in those Russia chapters.
Right. And it's kind of like, I prefer the balance a little more, the dialogue of Dashkov and Levitsky, who really have this power play back and forth, right? They're jockeying for position. And that's a lot of fun. That was very interesting. Yeah. But it's almost been dwarfed or it's been, drowned out by some of the geopolitical landscape painting, which is fun in its own right, but just a little off balance.
Yeah, later on, because Dashkov obviously he was Gramenko's like right-hand man. Like I feel like they had much more of a, even though they were, opposite counterparts, they had a much more friendly relationship. Mm-hmm. But now he's seen that like, well, one, his friend is dead, and he's, there's this new guy and
new kid on the block
doesn't want to show weakness, and obviously the president has his certain, he has other people who he calls to, and the little one-liners, like these little phone calls that happen between Levitsky and Dashkov, like, and he gets them, like it's pretty funny. Like I don't know, I enjoyed those little scenes.
Yep. It's about, isn't that your office that was supposed to be handling that thing?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very passive.
I would say don't mess up, because you'll have the shortest tenure as the head of the SVR.
Their barbs are pretty good. I do like the dialogue. That's why I'm saying I kind of want more of that instead of being drowned out by the other background, which is like really good stuff. I really like getting Jack's thoughts and perspective on all those other topics, including Ukraine, but it just seems kind of put in here to put it in. And, I think the drama of the Iran nuke being kind of stolen and the drama of those, what was it, uranium rods that are being trucked out, and that one guy who got the poisoning from it from getting too close that they used. I almost felt very Flynnian in that you're getting this character who kind of is just your average Joe. We hear about his family. He wants to go home and see his kids, like Flynn did that early on with like a random character who were all excited. He's going to go see his son's baseball game or whatever. Boom. But then he doesn't make it home. The action catches him up in the plot. So that was a lot of fun, but that kind of got filtered out, and the drama of those scenes isn't connecting for me back to the other drama or the other plots, simply because a lot of exposition getting in the way. So it's almost too much of a good thing. Maybe that's how I'll put it.
Yeah, like, if you would have let you could have started with that scene of them taking, the uranium cores, but you don't need to then cut back to say we stole it, I don't know. I'm critiquing the writing here. Like, I don't want to do it too much, because I actually, some of the writing here I really enjoyed. So I'm picking nits where we have to. Maybe we should get the nits out of the way, and then we can just gush on what we love about the book.
I agree. Yeah, and I think while we're on it, you're right. Just to knock it out of the way, we kind of got these Armenian assassins, or this gang of Armenians who wasn't very well trained. They were kind of thrown at a plot and put together last minute. Just didn't seem like how our typical Russian handlers, do things. So maybe that's on purpose, right? That there's some sloppiness here, some desperation out of Levitsky. And then also a German assassin. And I like the phone call a lot. And we're going to get to that scene, but it just felt like, wait, we have an Armenian gang? Wait, we have this German assassin who was hired? Wait, we got these nuclear fuel rods being moved in Iran. I want to see that get tightened up a little bit, just a little tighter, and how all that connects could really do a lot for me. So I think with that out of the way, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I think those are all of my negatives.
Yeah.
Let's get into the many positives we have.
Oh yeah. I want to get to James, because we said it last time. James is what makes this series sing. I think Jack made a character here who is ultimately going to be in the pantheon of the greats, up there with Mitch, up there with Scott Harvath. No doubt James Reece, his name is being put up there, Jack Ryan, everything. So what did you think when Vic springs him? We get him out of prison. Man, he's reunited with Rafe. He's eventually reunited with Katie. Didn't that feel so good to have some of these people back, from Vic to Rafe to Katie? Wasn't it amazing?
Yeah, and I honestly thought, we're 35 chapters in, 33 chapters in, and we have no Katie yet. And I was like, wow, he's really going to do this. He's going to push her off until much later. Because first of all, I'm thinking, he went and saw the lady. He went to the Poe Ranch. He's like, I got to go to this before, because Vic came to see me, and I got to go talk to Poe first,
which we should talk about.
Yeah, we'll get to that. A lot going on there. I love the OSS stuff, by the way, too.
Yes.
That, like, the early stage CIA, the OSS into the CIA. I guess because it reminds me of every time that Vince brought up the Wild Bill Donovan days, like learning about that through, because I knew nothing about it until I started reading these novels, and then I would dig in a little bit more into it. But anyways, the fact that, and then she comes out of nowhere, right? He gets into his hotel room, and then boom, she's there. And it's like, oh, of course. Okay, I knew you were going to bring her in. And then that, maybe it's not safe for this podcast to talk about, those couple chapters. Woo, that was.
Mark it explicit.
That was a new side of Jack Carr I hadn't seen. But yeah, no, I think coming off the proposal, you knew that their first interactions was going to have to be, powerful, loving, and great to have her back.
Yep.
And then sort of not in a sexual way, but in a very similar emotional, loving way, his interaction with Rafe, seeing him.
Yeah.
They're not blood brothers, but they are true brothers. And he's the only one that he can truly trust. And the fact that I like how he's becoming like a Scott type character.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite pieces of writing here, I can't even say my favorite scene or anything, but just as a piece of prose, when Rafe is talking about what James means to him for having saved his life and this debt that he owes him. Because I was wondering that. I'm like, they're at this random house. I don't know about Poe yet. I know we're being led to understand he was an integral part of James's family. And so if James's father and grandfather, trusted this guy. And
oh, so you were a little on edge about him.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up in a second. I want to talk about him. But I don't feel as comfortable with him yet, right? And
sure, we don't know.
Maybe I'm not supposed to, because while he's got the photographs on the wall, I almost got Gollum vibes when he asks about the key. Do you have the key, James? Your father and I were working on something. And if James Reece is hesitant and says no and lies to him, for some reason, I'll get to Poe. But the point is, when they're at this house, I'm like,
interesting.
Is James safe here? I know he should be, but something's wrong here. And somebody did tip off the guys, right? How did they know James was there? Because that Armenian team was sent for him. But when Rafe is like, I'm going to be the sentinel.
I think it's just the Russians knew.
Russian intel.
They were watching him, remember? Because they even knew once he went to Boston. So I think they had been watching Poe and this Martha lady for years. And she even says that, right? That I guess they didn't kill us because we didn't actually know anything about it. We just knew the people connected to it.
I don't know. I do wonder though if there's foul play, because something just told me, this whole trust no one, which there is a payoff to trust no one, but I'm also wondering if that's his dad's advice, does he mean trust no one, even someone who he thought was his closest partner, Poe? And maybe towards the end of Tom's life, he realized Poe was not who he thought he was, or there was a stab in the back, but James would never know that, right? So all James would see is, oh, you knew my grandfather. Oh,
right.
I was fishing with you as a little boy. Oh, you have pictures with me. And oh, I have all these memories and stories. But does James maybe not get read in on something that happens later in life that Tom never got to tell him? So I don't know. I'm just hesitant for the time being. But when Rafe acts like the sentinel in the night, and he's just like, I'm standing guard. I'm going out with my sniper. I'm not letting anything happen to this man, my brother, like you said.
Oh, yeah.
The way that scene was crafted, it was just really, really cool. It was just Rafe being Rafe, but doing it out of his deep love. It's brotherly love. It is the example of brotherly love, and I'm sure what the guys in the teams do for each other. And I felt that come through on the page so strongly with Rafe in that scene.
Yeah, because we do start that scene, right, with he's looking, it's all in Rafe's head, right?
Yes.
He's looking at James, seeing that he's like, honestly, a little bit of a broken man after being in prison, and realize that I gotta step up, I gotta do something to protect us, to protect him, this guy who saved my life. Yeah, it's interesting you brought up those things about Poe. I also, too, got a little bit of those vibes. And I don't know why I was feeling, and then I kind of brushed it away when
Martha Stowe?
No, like I almost brushed it away when we found out that, Martha and him were friends, and then, it was all like one connection. But the one thing I kept like trickling back to, like, Poe is wealthy because his father had like a shipbuilding business.
Right.
And, that just like thinking back to this whole consortium business, right?
It's old money.
Is it called the consortium? What is it? What is it called?
There was a name for it. I don't know, but that group, the
deep state. Another word for the deep state.
And what is it in James
the council,
Bond Spectre?
Pick a name for it, but a cabal of elites, and they even mentioned that it's people on both sides of the Iron Curtain, right? It's Russians, it's Americans, it's Canadians,
it's opportunists.
Chinese, it's opportunists. They're the ones that are deciding the stuff, and it's like, oh, well, he has old money. Is he actually a plant? That's kind of been, because also like you need, it can't be just this straightforward, right? I'm thinking in my mind, it can't be this straightforward.
Yeah, because the plot, aside from the Russia thing getting a little murky, it's been a very straightforward plot. It's, the beats are kind of hitting on like James is out of prison. He's got things to track down about his father. The Russians are doing what they're doing, try to set up some catastrophe, which I guess we kind of talked about it. But the geopolitics I don't find super interesting. Blame it on Iran. U.S. blows Iran out of the picture, and then the Russians and the Chinese can get together. Everything is kind of flowing. It's kind of straightforward and simple. And I like that. It's allowing the characters to shine instead of the characters getting hidden by a confusing what's going on here plot. You don't have to stop and really ask yourself when Reece is talking to Vic, and then he's talking to Poe, and then he goes to find Martha Stowe. You don't have to stop and ask yourself, who? How do they play in? No, the writing is so clear.
Yeah, exactly.
You know who these people are. And I'll take that back to the prologue being so smart to plant the assassination of the Stowes. Because when we come back and hear that Tom Reece was on the dock that night and took the long shot to take out the assassin, jump in the water, save Martha Stowe, give her chest compressions. Again, what Rafe is doing for Reece, it seems like Tom Reece was willing to do for the Stowes. And maybe that's why I trust the Stowes, even though they were a political family and she was part of the old money and he was running for president. For some reason, I trust them in my bones a lot more because we've seen Tom Reece with Stowe. We got that in the prologue where Poe is kind of coming out of the blue. I'm just kind of like,
right.
Wait, who? I'm supposed to believe because of these photos you have this relationship, but I haven't seen you with them. And so I don't know what to believe about you. But the Stowes, just everything about how this is crafted, linking back to the prologue, seeing that Tom was there with the assassination. James is learning that as we, the reader, is learning it. Brilliant storytelling, excellent thriller writing. And I think that's some of the finest of what Jack's been able to do in terms of storytelling since Savage Son. I really think since Savage Son, I haven't seen this level of elevated storytelling in these books.
Yeah. No, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. So I was going to ask you about the motivations of the Russians, why they're doing this to pull. The whole idea is like, right, he's literally pulling off of the Ukrainian invasion and the potential invasion of Taiwan. So like, how do we cripple the West? Well, we pull them away from supporting Ukraine. They're going to have to fight Iran. Like, what did what did you think of that whole plot? Like this idea to do that?
I think it's okay. I think it's good. I think the way it's explained with this backdrop of history, everything checks out, right? It's not like something doesn't check out, right? Like, oh, they're probably wrong that this side would calculate that it was this group and therefore respond in kind in this way. And no, I think it all checks out. It's just that if you maybe wrote the part about the Russians willing to blame this thing on Iran to kind of get the West distracted so they can continue their escapades in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, while the world's distracted, the U.S. is distracted, China can take Taiwan. I really like all that scenario role playing, if that's what you can call it. But then I'm kind of like, let's get back to Reece, or let's get back to the nukes and what happened to these rods. Instead of being told the plot through exposition, being told
I want to be shown it.
Right, through the characters. Like, remember Memorial Day, what's his name, sneaking into Miami on the boat.
Right.
That's how you get the nuke into the country. Like, tell me that, or give me a character on the ground putting these pieces together. So it's good. I like it. I think it all checks. It's interesting thought process. Is it driving the plot enough for me? I'm not sure yet. We'll see what happens in the second half. So I think it's all good. What's your read on that?
Yeah, no, it's kind of the same. Like there's other ways that I would maybe prefer to see some of that stuff that we kind of touched on before. But it's an interesting idea. This how to cripple the United States by taking out our semiconductor production. So.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. You know what's interesting? Have you started The Diplomat? Did you hear about this show?
I have, with Kerry Russell.
Yeah. Did you watch it?
No, not yet.
It's pretty good. And there's kind of a similar plot. I don't want to say too much, but there's a false flag operation, which has to do with Iran, except it involves the Brits. And so it really stresses the U.S.-British relationship, which, I mean, if you were Russia and or China, it's kind of what you want,
Yeah, sure.
If you could fracture age-old relationships, centuries-old relationships like that, that's a really big step. So, and then again, it's written by Deborah Kahn, who was one of the writers on The West Wing, perhaps my favorite all-time TV show. So it has hints of that. I think it's trying to do it for a modern audience, and it gets some things right. But it's kind of how I feel about this book. A false flag operation, like, oh my goodness, like Ukraine, and a year or two ago, I would have been so wrapped up in that. Or the Trump years, right? If you gave me an Iran conflict in a thriller right after we took out Soleimani, or right after we bombed their arms depot, or they hit us and then we kind of retaliated in kind, and then things simmered, where those tensions were boiling up, I think a lot of this would have hit a little harder for me. It's just right now we're all kind of distracted by Ukraine and X, Y, and Z, and George Santos, and Trump's indictment, everything else. Like, I'm kind of distracted by all those things. It almost feels not modern anymore, even though I'm sure he put these things in to feel more current. It just shows the world, things are just rapidly changing. The 24-hour news cycle, and it's kind of strange that that's affecting me as a reader of a thriller that just came out.
Yeah, I think that happens when you put like fresh current stuff into your novel that is being written months before it's published, you know?
And I'm not sure. I mean, we'll see with Deadfall, with the Ukraine crisis. I'm not sure how I feel about it just yet. Being this present, this current, like you have to bring up Ukraine and work it into a plot. It was that same hesitancy or ambivalence a lot of us felt on. You have to put COVID in a plot, you know?
Right.
What if we just had a thriller that didn't mention the Ukraine conflict happening, that didn't mention COVID? I think it would be a breath of fresh air. So, you know, sometimes when it's stuck in here in these ways, I'm like, it just takes me out of the verisimilitude of the story. You know, I don't feel like I'm in the story anymore because I'm straddling our world and their world. And sometimes
Sure.
I just want to be in their world, you know?
Yeah. And another thing, he also puts in COVID and, like, you know, puts in, you know,
Right.
whether it's his 2 cents or just, you know, putting words into the Russian sense about what COVID is, what the COVID vaccine mandates and stuff like that is,
Right.
you know, so.
People might like it. People might love that, you know, seeing that.
I mean,
hesitant.
he has a base. He has a base that buys these books, and there are things that they're going to like to read in this novel. I can see it. You know, it's marketing. It's marketing, dude. So
yeah, I'm not going to disagree. Us cynics over here.
I mean, politics is a game, right? So I mean, you could tell that I think he wants to run for office. At
Car
some point,
36.
So. Car 36.
Is there even an election 36? Probably not. I just made it up.
Yeah. Ooh, what if it was Scott Harbath, or not Scott Harbath? If it was Brad Thor versus Jack Carr.
Now that's a debate.
That's a debate.
A nationally televised debate over being a pantser or a plotter.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Oh no, wait, they don't do debates anymore on TV. Never mind.
Yeah, not anymore. Anyways, so
Winkler or cayenne pepper up the urethra. Go.
Oh yeah, we should have that debate. Like, debate the best kill each of you had respectively and why it's better than the other's respective kill.
Ooh.
You know.
And then say what you think the other person's best kill is that they ever wrote.
Yes.
That'd be kind of cool.
And we know that they're friends because he puts, like, James Reece reading the latest Brad Thor novel in a couple of his books. He's brought it up. So
Scott Coleman is canon in the James Reece universe. So yeah.
So there's a couple things I want to touch on. We have to get into the action. Obviously, I think maybe we'll save that for the very end. But you know, this idea of truth and consequence. You know, that's what his prologue at the very end of his preface mentions, that this is the themes for the book. You know, one, have you thought that, you know, that has sort of come to fruition? And then the other thing, we kind of mentioned Alice a little bit, but this idea that Alice is now free. And what I want to ask you, like, how do you think Alice, if any, is going to be deployed in the second half? So you can choose which questions you want to answer first.
Oh, dude, I'm glad you brought up that Alice nugget, because when that was dropped, I'm like, oh my God, it's Age of Ultron. You know? Like,
yeah, exactly.
It was so cool. And like, that I think is what concerns everybody about AI. You know, right now we're in the stage of like, ChatGPT is going to be used for cheating by students in college. Okay, sure. Whatever. No big deal. That's a story, you know, as old as time. People are going to find a way to cheat. It's just this time they're using ChatGPT. But to me, the real interesting futurism, if you will, of artificial intelligence is what happens when it becomes sentient, when it makes its own decisions regardless of human input. And then ultimately, once it moves to a stage beyond the devices we tried to put it into or box it into. Alice was created under this Air Force base. Where was it, in Colorado or whatever?
Yeah.
What happens?
Lackland.
Yeah. What happens once Alice escapes that and is able to do it on its own? And when that's dropped, that she it's out there. Alice is free. That was a cool, like, metaphysical kind of question you're asking there. What does that mean to say an AI is now free? Katie even asks, like, who is this? Should I be worried? You know, are you gonna propose to her instead of me? And it's like, is she? You're calling her a she? And he's like, yeah, it's complicated. You know, it's complicated. We use that for relationships, and now the human language can say that about human relationships with AI. Like, man, that just, what does that mean for human psychology, human anthropology? I think those are really cool questions. And so seeds like that, and then Katie wondering, this thing is sentient, you're saying? I'm like, man, those are some seeds for Alice to do some pretty crazy stuff down the road and be this wild card. Like Ultron was, right? Once Jarvis was very different, but then once Jarvis became Ultron, it's like, whoa, the plot, the story's just blown open. I loved it. What's your take on it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I play with ChatGPT all the time, and we're actually at work trying to figure out how we can use some of these, large language learning models, to facilitate our work better. But yeah, you addressed it perfectly, like this idea that the most scary thing is when you can't turn it off and when it starts to think for itself, right? And we kind of got a hint at that. She was very smart in the last book, and it was kind of creepy, like what's going to happen. Yeah, so I hope Alice being free is brought up, or she comes back in later on in the novel, because I want to see what side is she truly on. Why did she try to get Reece out? I love the fact that Vic had to take 3 months to corroborate the fact that, because he thought, maybe Alice is lying to me.
Right. The fact that we're even talking about that is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's very, very crazy. So,
did this bot we created for our military to give us the upper hand, is it now screwing us over? Is it feeding us false information? And not because some nefarious actor, aka Russia or China, hacked it and is getting it to feed us this information, but did it on its own choose to do that to us? That is just awesome question to be asking in a thriller novel.
Yep. So what about my other question, though? This idea of, is he hitting the beats of truth and consequence?
I think so. I think the Alice discussion really gets at truth. And I think consequences gets at the Tom Reece storyline. Consequences, for whom, caused by who and for whom, I don't know yet. And I'm very interested. What are the consequences now that physically we can say Reece finally opened the box? And maybe this discussion will transition into the Boston sequence, the plot line at the bank, because I think consequence is really going to play out in the second half. Reece opened the box. We saw the contents. I want to ask you if you were satisfied with what was in that box. But I think consequence is going to come through when we get to see decisions have to be made now that this has come to light and is out there. And whose hands is it in, and what choices do they have to make? So I think there's a lot to come. But would you agree that question you ask poses real well, or fuses real well with what happened in the Boston sequence? Perhaps the best action sequence so far.
Yeah, because up until that, we've only really gotten the hit on the house with Poe at the Poe Ranch, right?
Right.
Which was cool, but it wasn't. I guess James he had a pretty cool kill, in the river, like that description. And
That's true.
You can tell that Jack is very good at describing, and then the way Ray Porter reads some of these the action sequences, it's very cool. But most of the people were either taken out by Poe with a shotgun, or Rafe with his sniper rifle, or James from long range. But once we get to hand-to-hand combat using his father's two different blades,
it's incredible.
That he's like, thank you. Yeah, no, but to your question about what was in the box, it's both awesome, the fact that we get these items, his father's passports, his father's money, a gun, an old Remington, and then we get the history of what the Remington is, right? Or not Remington, a Browning, right? And but then we get his father's original tomahawk,
yes,
and his original OSS knife. I forget the name of it, and that is what ends up saving him.
Yes,
was awesome. Now, what we're really intrigued about, what's in the box, the documents, we don't get.
We don't
and
know.
I that. I was almost like, oh, maybe this is a good point to talk about it because we actually, I was like, oh, maybe we should save the Boston scene because we're going to actually find out what's in the box, but we don't really find out what's in the box.
No.
We find out like what's in the box, but we don't really find out what's in the box. You know?
We see the toys, but we don't see the substance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the toys are used, I mean, just to put a bow on that, in the friggin' coolest way. When he first gets a kill in the urinal, when he's fighting the guy in the bathroom. And I think that one, did he have the tomahawk there, or was that all knife?
That was all knife.
That was knife. And then when he gets to the SUV.
No. The tomahawk comes at the end towards, I think, to his neck, right?
Right. But yes, but then we quickly transition to him pretending he cleans up, pretends everything's okay. He even waves to the guys in the SUV. He's like, oh yeah, the bodyguard, he's taking a piss back there. And then he goes ham on these dudes inside the car.
In the car.
Yo,
and like
using seatbelts and shit.
Yeah. That whole sequence is just freaking like, how the hell is this happening? And no one's, well, obviously, and the man in the black sweater is catching it all on camera. And the German assassin. I'm like, how is no one seeing what's going on? And then he's able to take out, the two guys that run up on, and then another guy, like, he shoots him through the car door, and then takes out both men on Ducatis. Like,
the motorcycle guys.
James Reece is a badass.
Yo, can you imagine Chris Pratt doing that scene and just taking dudes out in this SUV?
Driving along on a Ducati, one-handed with a tomahawk in the other hand, and he like is able to scrape the other dude with his tomahawk to pull him down, and then like is able to brake, hop off the bike, and then kill a dude.
Yo,
awesome.
I think that sequence, there's so many good James Reece kills, but as a sequence, oh dude, it's top class. It's one of the best action sequences in the whole series. I'm just going to say it. Maybe not my favorite kills in the series because, damn, there's some crazy shit. But for a total action sequence, start to finish, from the moment he engages the dude in the urinal to the moment he's on that motorbike, I'm like, this is just bananas. Loved every... And I think we were going to have a different pod if I didn't get to that scene.
Yes, we were going to have a very different pod if you didn't get to that
As
scene.
you said before... And you pushed me to get there. I'm so glad because, man, it hit at just the right time. Because that Armenian scene at the Poe Ranch, the Poe House, didn't quite scratch my itch of action. It was cool. Killed a couple of guys. There's some random gangbangers. The fact that this action scene happens with the lockbox that he just opened.
Right.
He's got the copies of the documents, right? He made copies. Do we see what he did with the copies, or are they still on his person?
No, that's what we don't. He like was very secretive about, oh, where's the copy machine? Like, and then it kind of cuts. So
yeah. And when he went into the urinal, I thought he was gonna plant them or something, or like leave them there to then tip somebody off. But I don't know.
We just go into straight badass mode. So
yeah, but the fact is that action sequence is not only hitting because it's really cool action. It's hitting because it's also involving the documents that he has to get out with. And then it's involving Rafe and Katie, who we just heard this whole thing of how Rafe is going to give his whole life to defend James and Katie and what makes him happy. And it's just, whoa, edge of your seat stuff right there. And it was a moment we needed it. The first quarter of the book, the exposition was good, but maybe you're looking for a little more. The second quarter of this book, leading to the halfway point, nonstop, constant edge of your seat. Whether it's edge of your seat action or even just edge of your seat, mind thriller, messing with your head, playing games with you over, can you trust Poe? Can you trust Martha Stowe? And the fact that he does tell Martha Stowe he has the key, or he's not able to hide it as easily, makes me trust her, where, I don't know, still on my toes about Poe, but we'll see what happens. Oh, I unfortunately, the whole trust no one, really cool password, by the way, at the bank, but I'm wondering about Vic. I hate to say this. I really, really...
Yeah, no, dude, I had the same vibe.
There's something in my gut that I'm just like, I don't know, man. This trust no one is almost hitting me too hard. I have like Chris Howdy syndrome. It's just, I don't want that to be the case, but Tom Reese is trying to warn James of something, and I don't know what it is. And it's scaring me because I should not be questioning Vic Rodriguez. Dude's the man. He's the absolute man. Yet something in me just, I'm like, who do I not trust here? It's got to be somebody.
Yeah, it's kind of like the writing is playing it up in the sense that someone we trust is not trustworthy. You know, like there's going to be like some sort of potentially maybe some sort of bombshell of a drop with someone not being trustworthy. Yeah. So no, I fully agree with you, and I'm intrigued. Where do you think? What's the next logical step for James after this? I guess he's obviously going to go meet up with Andy Denrep, who we've had a name drop. Like that, he has to go see him. He mentioned he needs to get these documents translated, so either Denrep or someone else at the CIA is going to do that for him, and we're gonna finally understand what's truly in the box besides the weapons.
I like Andy.
Yeah,
I like.
And
Andy
then he's got to figure out, you know, somehow this plot with Iran is going to, and Israel is going to align up with James. They haven't come together yet, so
yeah, I think they're going to have to, and I think those nuclear rods, we got to see something happen because it's been a while. It's been quite a few chapters.
Yeah, since we touched on them,
so yeah. I don't know how that's going to happen. Also, I'm a little worried this Levitsky character keeps failing. Like,
yeah,
the Russians have had a lot of failures here, and they really don't tolerate that. So I'm kind of nervous that Dashkov is going to get some big dick energy, you know, pull out his inner Gromyko and just, I don't know, he's going to have something bad planned. But so will Levitsky because he needs a win. You know, he's like a caged animal right now. He needs a W. So I think the two of them are going to have to pull some really bad stuff. And I mean, they sent so many teams after Reece. At what point do you stop that approach of just let's hire dudes, send them after him, before like, let's just get the job done? Like, let's take a drastic measure to kill this guy. So I don't know what's coming.
Do you think that German assassin that we met, is this setting it up for a future interaction? You know, because we get that phone call.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled, you know, like you stay away from me, I'll stay away from you type thing. Like, is that just like laying some foreshadowing, or are we gonna get any resolution with him in this book, or is he like being set up to be a player in future novels?
I don't know, but I like that phone call. I almost would have been really satisfied if they came to that gentleman's agreement, the professional, like, I pulled out of this hit, which I know screws my reputation, but because things went south and I saw what you did, and I don't want to get caught up with you.
I don't want to get messed up with you.
You don't want to get messed up with me because I got those skills. I just wasn't in the right time and place to match them. So how about we just call a spade and say, you know, you're as good as me, I'm as good as you. We'll leave it at that. But James doesn't consent.
No, he doesn't.
He's like, you took the money. You came after me. We know James is all about revenge. When he hangs up the phone and doesn't agree to the deal, I thought that was going to be it. And I would have been completely fine if it was. But the fact that he hangs up that phone makes me think one or both sides are going to have to take steps to rectify this situation. And there might be a collision course coming. It felt very Grisha Azarov. Did you feel that way?
A little bit. Yeah, that's why I brought it up, because it felt to me that way too.
And I like that, because I like about how Grisha is now out there. I guess you can call him a friend of Mitch, but it's really just a friendship born out of mutual respect. If you want to call that a friendship, maybe not. But I think that fulfills, you know, other operators like James and maybe as good are out there. They could do their own thing. They won't want to cross paths if they're smart enough, and so they don't. And I think that would be a cool way to leave it. But if he comes back, that could be a really cool train wreck also.
Yeah. No, totally agree.
Let me ask you a question. Do you have any other predictions of where we're headed? And I hate to ask this, but does anybody die? I asked you last time. Do you think there's anything big coming? Have you changed your tune on that? Are you getting the sense? What do you think's in store for the rest of the book?
I wouldn't say that anyone necessarily has to die, but I will agree with you in the sense that it's feeling like not everyone is who they say they are. Mm-hmm. There's going to be, I could be wrong, but it feels like there's going to be some bombshell about someone who Reece thinks is an enemy, and we're going to learn the truth and the consequences of their real, motivations. That could be, you could go crazy. Obviously the number one, the least likely candidate would be Katie. The second least likely candidate would be a Hastings, but that would be crazy. If Rafe is like actually, I don't think so, but Rafe, I'm just sort of saying it out there. I think more likely it's one of the newer characters, the Martha Stowe or the Poe, right?
What about the president? What about Olsen?
Yeah, the current one who took over.
Exactly. She's kind of been nothing yet, just mentioned twice or a couple times.
Yeah, we got that interesting chapter with that, Democratic senator,
right,
who is part of this, consortium type deep state, right? Yeah, like who is actually involved with him? Is Vic one of the people involved with that,
or Alice?
Or Alice is Alice part of that? Working for them, and she had to get Reece out because he was the only one who could get those documents.
That's right. Did Alice want the documents? Like, do the Russians? We know the Russians want the documents, but why? Why does it matter?
I think because so much? there's a Russian involved with the deep state, because they're actually buddy.
Yeah, exactly. Are they pulling strings? Because we thought this list was just a revenge list of people Tom had as informants or assets or people who have turned or people who sold secrets or people who double crossed him.
I thought it was a list of people or locations where the Russians had taken Americans.
There is that angle. I forgot about that.
Yeah, because they even mentioned that, but it's actually way more than that, right?
And if you're bringing in Tom Reece to the plot, it makes sense that something has to be tied heavily to the Vietnam era, and that was the connection, right? Tom Reece was investigating with the Stows, exposing Russians capturing service members, taking them back to Soviet territory and keeping them as prisoners, interrogating them. And yeah, he was about to expose that. I wonder, though, I feel like, sure, huge bombshell, right? Big historical nugget right there. Is it enough, though? Like, if that's all there is that enough to make it this big deal to have the current SVR and FSB heads so desperately hunting down James? There's got to be some bigger connection to the present than just, there's this historical tidbit of the Russians were doing really bad things to undermine our efforts in Vietnam. Yeah, it was called the Cold War, bro. Like, is that enough for you? I don't know if it's enough unless there's a deeper connection.
I think it's information about the consortium, the deep state. Like it's not names, maybe not like current names, because obviously this is from way back, but like names that can be tied to people today, about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so. I think you're right. I think that's it.
And not just Americans, but like the fact that while we were fighting in the Cold War, we were actually secretly talking to people in Russia and China and stuff like that. So
maybe something that can jeopardize this idea of the China-Russian relationship and them as the next wave of global dominance. Like something that could put that in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Well, dude, like Jack says, we love his author notes. The novel you hold in your hands is one of truth and consequences. How much of what follows is fiction and how much is truth? You will know when you turn the final page. Enjoy the journey. Time is ticking.
Time is ticking.
We'll turn that final page in a week or so, and you will hear from us our hot take and how well we enjoyed the journey. Chris, I'm very much enjoying the first half of our journey.
Yes, me too. No, I'm really digging this book. So Can't wait to finish it.
Yep.
I'm going to go finish it right after this pod.
Let's go.
Maybe not today, but definitely tomorrow. All right. We need to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always, trust no one.
Trust no one. You weren't going to go with, man buns and sexy haircuts?
Man bun fun?
Trust no one.
And as always, it's a 3-bottle wine night. Ooh, baby.
3-bottle of bourbon podcasting night.
And what did they talk about? That was just round one or quarter one. We have a whole game ahead of us.
Was this
halftime or just the end of the first quarter? That was funny.
This was the first mile of a marathon.
Who has that much sex? Like, Jesus.
The journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step.
I guess when you're pent up for 3 months, you gotta release a little bit,
You gotta let loose. Yo, Jack let loose with his fingers on the keyboard in that scene. Whoa, that was almost Brad Thor level of sex going on right there. Because he writes some spicy scenes. He
does. There's something that Vince never did, and Kyle sort of strays away from it too.
Yeah.
But at one point I was like, am I reading the right book? Is this did I get this off the erotica section,
Yeah, when things were put on hold in the blood between Katie and Reece, that night they were supposed to have together.
Yeah.
This made up for it.
Oh, yeah.
They made up for lost ground right there.
And then some.
And then some.